Okay, so this is the Baneling episode, much awaited. I'm Panera. We have Heretic here. Say hello.
Hi.
We've got Potatolisc,
Potatoes reporting in.
Zappy,
Here.
and Brutaxelos.
What's up?
And as usual, River's in on the call but has no mic because she's poor. That's just the excuse we use anyway. So today we're talking about the Baneling. And first I'll get your predictions of what you guys think that this thing is realistic or not. Starting with you, Heretic.
I'm going to say yes because you told me that about 45 minutes ago.
Yes. Okay. What about you, Potatolisc?
I'm gonna say yes because I actually have heard of bugs that suicide and explode and kill stuff. At least their prey, which isn't really all that ginormous.
Okay. All right. What about you, Zappy?
Well, I actually had this come up in our viewer questions thing, so I guess I'm kind of cheating here, but I'd say yes as well.
Okay. And as for you, Brutaxelos?
Yes, because they exist.
Well played. Well played.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with the sort of gross morphology here. As you guys know, they kind of have that bloated abdomen. And there's actually a really cool type of ant, of course. We're going to talk about ants because, it just happens to make a lot of sense. I don't know if you guys can hear my...
Always with the ants.
I know, I'm trouble.
I'm pretty sure I just heard a cat.
Yeah, my cat. I'll tell him to shut up if he gets too...
Okay, he just wants to contribute.
Yes, he does. It's like Starcraft's cat just sitting on my keyboard.
Except when you yell at him, the cat actually hears you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. This cat doesn't listen. Okay, so I sent you guys a link of honeypot ant. Now, honeypot ants, what's really cool about certain members of this species, certain members, or castes rather, is that they store glucose and sugars in their abdomen like that. And what's really cool is that all ants have formic acid. In fact, the word formica is the Latin word for ant, so formic acid was actually named after them. So getting acid into an ant isn't something that's very difficult. I would imagine that this might be the case for things like... is there any precedent for there being acid within anywhere in the swarm other than banelings and
Roach?
Yeah, but that, I think, you talked about like it before in Starcraft 1 and Brood War?
Yeah, Brood War or Wings of Liberty or Heart of the Swarm.
Are you referring to like as a weapon or just any acid anywhere?
Yeah, any acid anywhere in general.
Well, look at any living thing nowadays. They have some form of acid in them. Look at humans. They have formic acid.
It's true, yeah.
Acid attack in Brood War.
That was kind of a mistake, though. That I don't think they didn't intend to make it like that.
I feel like there was an acid thing. I'm just drawing a massive blank.
They did have an acid attack, but it was lore contradiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think there is some precedent that maybe perhaps Zerglings are inherently, they have some sort of acid like formic acid or whatever. I mean, hell, we eat ascorbic acid and all other types of a lot of other types of acids, so it's not something that's that far fetched. But anyway, so there is that precedent for that body form of that big bloated abdomen filled with a fluid. Now, there is... I'm going to send you guys another cool link here. It's an article, but the picture right at the top is an actual suicide bombing ant. And it's funny, it's actually a yellowish-green volatile sticky acid that happens when the ant ruptures its own body cavity, or if its body cavity happens to be ruptured.
Which one is the ant that we're talking about? The one on the right or the left?
I believe the one on the right
it's
just
the blue
ruptured.
One, if I remember correctly.
It's the which? It's the little one.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like it's been corroded.
In this picture, and we'll put this up for the viewers to be able to see the same picture. Basically, what you're seeing is the ant that's like the little brown one that's covered in goo. That one just ruptured its body cavity, so that's why it's like covered in the material in question, and it just got all over the passing by ant. So there is sort of that precedent for using suicide bombing in eusocial organisms. Termites do it too. So there is that really cool
bees, obviously.
Yep, bees use. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, whenever they sting, they end up pulling out their guts. So there is that. So you sort of get both ends of the main part of what a baneling is, that big bloated abdomen and the suicide bombing. And what's cool about this, and then as well, there's a type of termite. Some termites do this as well. As termites, certain types of termites age, and this is true for many ants as well, their mandibles will start becoming less and less effective because they wear down and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So as these particular individuals age in the species in question, they actually start developing acid-filled sacs, which then they can actually explosively shoot when they basically kill themselves in a similar way to what a baneling would do. So as these animals become less and less useful to a hive, they become more and more aggressive, more and more acid-filled. The acid sac actually does grow and whatnot. And so what I'm thinking is that I don't know if we know about the dune runners of Zagash or whatever the hell the original Zergling creature was, but perhaps this is because they seem like they might have been eusocial. Perhaps this was a process that the Zerg themselves have hijacked in order to say, okay, well now you're going to become a baneling even if you've just hatched as a Zerg.
I got something to say. Before Starcraft 2 came out, Blizzard was releasing a lot of short stories, and they made one story about the origins of the Baneling. So basically, short summary with it, there was like a Terran base in some weird ass planet, and they were like in some gorge. There's like this green moss that's really acidic, and they were basically sieged by birds, and they ended up eating the moss and they started to like rot their teeth and stuff. So what happened was they started noticing that the Zerglings were consuming this moss or something, and they began to notice that the Zerglings ate so much they started getting bloated, and they like Terran people thought they were just being really stupid and stuff, right? And they later realized that the Zerg was slowly mutating the Zerglings to be bloated to contain the acid in them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's how this sort of acid was introduced to the swarm then.
Yep.
Okay, so that's perhaps. I guess that explains maybe Zerglings don't inherently have some sort of acid reservoir or whatever, or inherent acidity to them like ants do.
They can't just instantly go into cocoon mode like you see in multiplayer and bam, Baneling 17-20 seconds later.
Well, I think what happens is the genetics of this moss or whatever has been repurposed, and so basically you get this whole scenario where yes, an aging Zergling might become more aggressive as it's more useless to the hive and whatever, and because of the nature of it's kind of funny the hive mind itself in the Zerg. Yes, it's eusocial, so you would get a lot of this, like, okay, well, older individuals will become more aggressive and be thrown away, as scouts or as, like, poison tasters or whatever, which actually does happen in ants. But you also have this cognitive ability going on, where they're able to say, okay, well, this is a particularly useful thing. We can't wait for these Zerglings to age, so we're going to introduce a stimulus that causes them to artificially do it.
That's one theory. I kind of agree with that, but another possibility is like similar to the pufferfish. Pufferfish we all know are really, really poisonous, but they don't get their toxins naturally. They actually get it from something they consume, I believe.
And there's actually a really cool related ant thing to this as well. The horny toad, which lives all the way from southern Alberta all the way down through Texas and whatnot. They eat exclusively ants, pretty much. They just sit there and eat ants all day. And they take this formic acid, and they actually mix it with blood and store it in an eye gland, which they then so it becomes this like acrid, rotten, acidic blood. And they can actually shoot that out of their eye for quite some distance at any predator. So just to give a specific example of what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
So so maybe they. How would you go about what we see in the game is you get the Zergling enters Cocoon, comes out as Baneling. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. What do you guys think?
I guess both are possible. I mentioned in a previous show that the Zergs might be using creep to supply nutrients. So I don't I don't have any confirmation. Like maybe in multiplayer it's probably not as accurate. I mean,
yeah, for balance purposes.
Perhaps the creep supplies some of the nutrients to make the Zergling physically like larger too.
Well, how would you propose that they can morph off of creep though?
I know, but that's just like a multiplayer. Maybe a little like you can't really balance it if you can't morph Zerglings off creep. But I don't know. That's just a suggestion. I'm not really.
Perhaps it's a stimulus.
I thought the same thing, and then because I was also trying to think of how a corruptor could morph into a broodlord, but I ended up with the same problem. Those aren't attached to the creep in any way. I mean, obviously there's a huge size difference between a corruptor and a broodlord, but there's no real evident way of them getting all those extra nutrients to make more animal.
Another possibility is they might actually be having a chemical reaction. So they might have two different random chemicals in their body, and they just introduce them together, and they become this green acid.
Well, here's something interesting actually about formic acid is that it's a very simple carboxylic acid, right? And so basically what can happen as certain materials rot, they can actually form this acid and other acids. So perhaps what's going on is you get a stimulus from an overlord telling a Zergling, okay, you're going to enter this cocoon, and some of its biological material starts to rot in a specific and, I guess, controlled way under the right sort of environmental controls within the cocoon. That's how you get this body of acid. That would explain why it's all sticky and disgusting too, to be honest. So it's pretty bad.
So we have a Zergling entering a cocoon from a command from the Overlord.
Yep.
And then we have a Baneling coming out, and we have a theory of the body breaking down and then reconstructing itself in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Well, what happens in any sort of cocoon or chrysalis is the body actually really it really sort of almost becomes goopy in a way. I mean, it's kind of a strange process. I don't really fully understand it myself. But what could be happening is that the abdomen is sort of restructured, and within these sacs that the Baneling has, there's an active decay process that, just from leftover materials, like, say, the wings of the Zergling, or, like, the extra derpy arms that come off from the top of the Zergling. That material can be sort of redirected while you're in that sort of more fluidic, I guess, state within a cocoon. And that could be what's rotting. And therefore, like, if you have the right conditions, rotting under certain circumstances does produce acid. So I think that makes sense as well. And if you guys look at, like, just imagine, the honeypot ant filled with acid, and then another ant comes by, they can actually rupture their own cuticle, and I believe they would do this just by, I mean, they've got really simple musculature within. They could just sort of provide a torsion or a shear sort of motion and crack their own cuticle, and with all the pressure inside, kind of squirt all over the place.
Okay,
so I think
I want to say something. In that short story that I talked about,
yep.
one of the scientists took a piece of the Baneling. It was around the size of a blitzer, they said, and she pointed a laser at it in her little lab room, and then the whole room blew up. So it was. I remember reading in a forum that someone calculated if this was the amount of if it was the amount of energy released from that tiny bit, then the explosion of a Baneling would be ridiculously high and, like, not realistic at all. I also want to say, like, the real life examples we've shown, even though they sacrifice themselves with acid, they don't actually blow up. So
no, that's what I was saying. Like, there's such pressure that as soon as you get that crack in the cuticle, it kind of squirts everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't like necessarily.
It appears that they are also explosive, though. It's not really pressure, like they're squeezing it out. They actually have some kind of, like, combustion.
So maybe similar to, like, a bombardier beetle, where they have the two different chemicals, and then they just inject a primer protein, and that causes it to sort of.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of that example too, but I don't really think that's really much of an explosion too.
It's pretty volatile, actually. It really is.
Oh yeah, they do have heat too, right? I remember there's heat produced from it.
Yeah, exactly. There would be considerable heat from probably the just rapid decay and whatnot. I'm kind of just looking at the Baneling itself now, just kind of looking at the gross anatomy, and it's got the random derp spikes everywhere running down the midline, and the of course the Hydralisk derp jaw as well. That's probably a holdover from the Zergling itself, but it's got like the centrifugal hooks. What do you guys think about those?
Well,
overall, the Baneling is actually a really unstable creature. If you look at how it walks, it's really, really top-heavy. And it's got really short legs. If you were to try to walk like that, you would be falling over as it is naturally, just because it's very, very imbalanced and not making a balance joke.
It's got a really low center of gravity, though, as well. So, and here's the thing, the body itself kind of curves as well. So it kind of reminds me, I don't know if you guys have seen the Life I think it was in the Life documentaries. It might have been Planet Earth, but I think it was Life. Anyway, there's this little toad called the pebble toad. And when it's scared, it just sort of curls up into a ball and like bounces down a mountain in a ball.
Ouch.
So it doesn't sustain any damage because it just tenses its muscles in such a way. But I think that could be a good sort of analog for what's going on here. Maybe behaviors curling into a ball and whatever that has been repurposed by the swarm. I don't know. What are you thinking about all this, Heretic?
I think the shape of the Baneling, it doesn't look like it's really suitable for rolling like that, and also like it has all those spikes over its body, and that unless they could pierce metal in the ground and stuff, I think that would make it unsuitable for certain terrain.
Well, I remember back. I would actually like to object that point. I remember back when Blizzard released. I don't remember. There was a video with it, and they showed Banelings, and they were just rolling 40, 50 miles per hour, no problem. So it looked like they protected their body.
Yeah, the trailer where are you talking about the trailer where the Ultralisk takes the shot from the tank and there's all the Zerglings and Banelings?
I was too busy focusing on the Banelings to even notice the Ultralisk, as hard as that might be imagined.
Yeah, the Ultralisk. I watched that trailer. I hope they extend it for the upcoming Heart of the Swarm game.
Yeah, because I just saw them. I was like, wow, they're just bouncing right along. I'd hate to be a Marine there.
Yeah, they I don't know how they would get such momentum going either. Like if you look at the body itself,
the hooks start pulling it, and then
there actually is a species of spider in the desert that rolls up into a ball. It's not forward, but on its side, and it rolls down hills, and it's pretty interesting on how it moves too. But I guess they get their momentum from gravity, so.
Yeah.
Well, how does
and you just let physics do the rest.
Well, like the Baneling doesn't have an inherent acceleration period, right? Like it kind of just curls up into a ball and it's going, right?
Yeah. Well, that could mean that it kind of pushes off with its legs, and then once it gets a little momentum from that, it just curls up into a ball and lets it go from there. I mean, assuming, especially on the creep, you'd have very low friction with the centrifugal hooks, you could actually keep going reasonably well with that.
Yeah, that's true. I don't see where the hooks would be, though.
It would grow them out of its back from the look. At least this is based off of multiplayer. It looks like it grows them out of its back and on its bottom, and then it just starts rolling.
I disagree. I think the centrifugal hook it's a hook on the legs, and basically what happens is it helps it hold itself together when it rolls up to a ball.
Well, if you look at the actual icon for the upgrade, it looks like there's some curved hooks coming off of like the green parts. So the legs don't actually have any acid sacs. So I think that it's probably on the back.
So it'd be coming out.
I have another image though, like of a Baneling like in motion rolling.
Sure.
Oh, yeah?
It's contrary to the upgrade look. So it just looks like it looks like the Baneling just brings its legs around, and the hooks is actually like to help hook the leg onto its body, so that it holds it together when it rolls.
Okay.
I had to look for the picture though. So
on another note, though, we were talking about why it might have all those spikes on its back. That could be part of the centrifugal hooks. I mean, once you research the upgrade, the spikes could extend a little bit, and maybe it just is too small for you to see in the multiplayer, but then once those spikes extend, it would help it gain traction on the ground. Assuming that Brutaxilus's idea is wrong, which might not be a safe assumption here.
I think it could be both. I mean, why not?
I guess that's true as well.
Why not?
Yeah,
both?
Yeah, why not both? Everyone wins, right?
Like that taco commercial.
I don't know what taco commercial you're talking about. River would probably know about that because she's in Florida and is Mexican or something like that. So
might be just an American thing, though.
Yeah, it might be. And I'm Canadian, so I don't necessarily get the same. Okay, so
whoa!
Do you guys,
here it is.
Are you guys clear on why it makes sense for an organism to be an altruist within a eusocial setting?
Yep.
What?
We actually went over that a decent amount in the beer questions that I did with you. So, I mean, if anybody else is confused, they can go to that.
Link, please, so I don't waste valuable time.
Yeah, I'll get it to you in a second.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, anyway, there's a whole reason behind that, and it actually makes a lot of sense. One thing that doesn't make sense to me in the swarm, this is sort of a disconnect between them and ants for once. What you see with ants, there's certain species that do this in particular, is when you have a young, newly metamorphosed ant come out with the egg, or whatever you want to call it, they typically spend a little bit more time kind of nursing the other babies and whatnot. They don't go out on long-range scouting missions and things like that. So the younger individuals have an inherent higher value because they want to get the maximum amount out of the lifespan. And I'm not seeing that with the Zerg. So that's kind of a disconnect where they've almost devalued their own species within their swarm so much so that, newly hatched Zerglings can be shipped right off to enemy mineral lines and left for dead.
Well, we could assume that is a gameplay, a multiplayer aspect. Maybe lore-wise they don't actually do that, but I can't really confirm that or not.
Yeah, we're trying to. Well, it's hard to reconcile both, but I think maybe that I don't know. I also came across something quite interesting. A guy points out, like when you have and we'll talk about this in a specific way within, say, the Zerg hive. When you have a newly formed hatchery, and this is true for actual metagaming stuff as well, which I found to be rather cool. When you have a new hive, let's say you lose 10% of your hive Zerglings or whatever.
Wait, hive being the building or hive being just like the Zerg? The Zerg version of a city.
Yeah, like a newly formed hatchery, say. If you lose 10% of your, say, Zerglings, that's a big deal. Like, if you only have 10 Zerglings and you lose 1 Zergling, that makes a bigger difference than losing 10 Zerglings when you have 100.
Yeah.
And that's something that we see within ant hives as well, and same with bees and stuff, is as they get bigger, the inherent value of the individual is decreased significantly. So you see that with ZVZ especially, right? Where it's like one big Baneling hit and that's game over.
Yeah, I know that pain.
Oh, I hate that. It's the most... I hate ZVZ with a burning passion.
That's why I don't play Zerg as much.
Yeah, I switched from Zerg over to random recently, so...
That's
anyway,
but every ZVZ to avoid that.
yeah, Roach Rush, yeah, exactly.
One SR, that's how you play Zerg. Okay, I can't.
do.
Be politically correct, I'm
and
kidding.
Spam pauses.
Yeah. It's the biggest clusterfuck, but anyway, it's just kind of a cool reflection that you get that sort of value, like let's say one or two Banelings, early game Zerg, ZVZ. If you lose both of those Banelings on crap hits and your enemy kills a bunch of Zerglings with their two Banelings, that's game over. Whereas 15 minutes into the game, you can throw away Baneling after Baneling and it doesn't actually hurt at all.
Well, that's cutting into your gas count, but...
Yeah, I mean, but it's like a fraction of the damage
minimal.
that would
That's minimal.
earlier in the game, right?
You don't really...
And that's something we see with ants and bees. As the colony grows, they're more likely to just say, oh, there's an invading whatever. Okay, we'll just throw wave after wave after wave of crap at them until they die. Rather than when something invades and there's only, say, like, a brand new hatchery, they kind of just, like... They're more reserved and timid. So I guess it almost goes back to the whole, like, as you tech up as the Zerg, they definitely gain way more aggressive potential as well.
Oh, yeah.
And they like a hive, like an established hive, will be inherently more aggressive than a brand new hatchery.
That follows with gameplay, too, because, I mean, if you think about it, as the hive techs up, eventually you have broodlords, which just... by themselves without any input from the the overlords or whatever. We'll just start launching little broodlings at everything.
Yeah, exactly.
The increasing waves of units follows.
And also, I can say as a random player that the longer you let a Zerg live without getting in his face, the scarier it gets.
Yeah, exactly, and that's true because you don't have that attrition, and that's true for ants too. If they're just left to go, a genus called Atta, which is the leafcutters, they can hit the 1 million mark rather quickly, and then they start getting more specialized, more differentialized, and it gets to the point where a single hive of leafcutters can actually outcompete cows.
For deforestation or for eating?
For grass cutting, for grass consumption.
Wow.
Yeah, so farmers down in South America actually pour cement down into, or like put dynamite in them because they actually outcompete cows.
Dynamite in what? Just to...
in the ant colonies.
Wait,
they put it.
Oh,
could I say something real quick?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So regarding the Baneling momentum, the picture I sent to you guys earlier, the one by Mr. Jack, there was the Baneling on the left side. Here, I'm gonna send you the URL again. Wait, sorry, it's the wrong one. The Baneling is actually using its legs to push itself forward while it's rolling.
Yeah.
So
it almost looks like it.
But that could also be just completely it was at a standstill starting up. To start moving.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at it, the one Baneling is actually on its back and pushing off, so that could be part of its propulsion as well, because most Banelings don't start rolling on their back.
This picture that Eric just provided, Brutaxilus, as people know him, it's kind of cool. The Baneling egg itself, you can actually see the legs of the Baneling kind of poking up. Like, you can see the body form of the Baneling quite clearly, actually.
Yeah.
That is really cool. I never noticed that before. And I'll save this picture, and I'm sure River will put it up for everyone to see so that people aren't just,
wondering what the hell we're looking at.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm going to try anyway. We'll endeavor to do that. But anyway, it kind of brings up, a lot of questions about maybe we should do an episode on how the hive develops from one stage to another, and look at the ecology as it moves forward. That would actually be pretty cool. Maybe that'll be next episode. I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm trying to arrange some. I'll maybe let the cat out of the bag. I'm trying to arrange for some Starcraft 2 celebrities to be on the show. Whether that's a famous caster or a famous player, I don't know yet. But I'm working very hard to do that. So maybe also we will be able to get one of the forum moderators like Cocoon or something to come on the show as well. I think that'd be pretty cool. So everyone put pressure on them. Oh my gosh, we're already at 30 minutes here, so I'm gonna cut us off. Does anyone have anything to say before we stop?
A couple questions.
Okay.
If we have enough time.
Yep.
So the Banelings, I looked at a bunch of pictures and I couldn't see any of them with eyes on them. So, is there a reason that they kind of go backwards from the Zergling and lose their vision?
They also lose their little wing attacking things too. The whole appendage.
Yeah. You know what? I don't know, and I don't know how they see.
Overlords.
Whether that's the Overlords, I would imagine provide.
If you look at an overseer, they have at least 25 eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think they make up in eyes for when Banelings miss them.
Also, when they're rolling, they probably can't see too well anyways.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it doesn't matter. It's like an animal in a cave just loses its pigment in eyes. What might be a cool thing is if Zerglings leave like a pheromone trail, kind of like an ant would, and then that would be like a recruitment trail, and then the Baneling kind of knows, depending on which chemical and what direction, which way to go.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
That is a good answer.
Zerglings are really fast too. They're faster than Banelings, assuming you get the speed upgrade.
They're faster than Hellions, which I'm assuming are going at least 60 miles per hour.
Yeah, exactly. So they're capable of laying down that trail ahead of the Banelings anyway. So I think it could be something as subtle as intraspecific there. Okay, you had another question there, Heretic?
Yeah, so I think Banelings would only really be useful if the other units in the Zerg swarm could somehow resist their acid, but how would they accomplish that?
Well, the carapace can be quite resistant. I mean, there are certain things, like if you were to say dump some weak acid or whatever, some low concentration acid on some enamel, that might not do very much. And there's just certain chemicals and things you can have. It's kind of like how all ants have a ton of formic acid in them, but you don't see them necessarily ever worrying about it, That doesn't, I mean, that sort of begs the question in ZVZ, swarm versus swarm. Is it an arms race where, okay, well, our banelings, we're going to change the concentration or change the chemicals or the types of acid or whatever so that it can hit your cuticle, and then in response, they would go back and forth in an arms race? I don't know.
I kind of have a theory on how banelings could also be, or how the Zerg could actually be resistant.
Oh, yeah?
At some point during the mutation, there have to have been a few victims of experimentation amongst the Zerglings and roaches and whatnot. Because to resist something, you first have to have a poor victim who is not resistant to it, and then he has to genetically mutate to be resistant to it, or his offspring have to, or someone or something related to him has to mutate to be resistant to it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that the Zerg aren't actively breeding themselves. So it's basically a case of, again, there's that one episode where we talk about this, where like a Zergling is more related to another Zergling than it would be to its own kids. So it makes more sense to protect your sister Zerglings rather than your even to bother having children. So I think in that sort of ideal, when you're getting to the point where you social insects or Zerg or whatever are able to, amorally go about testing their own weaponry, that sort of selection process is actually useful. It's actually very useful for when compared with what we're used to, as far as like, I'll just have kids and then they'll be really related to me and whatnot. It's kind of a different system, and it's explained, I believe, in that other video a little bit better than here, anyway.
Again, that was the viewer questions with me, because I'm going to plug myself here.
Yeah, that's your questions with Zappy. Go watch that one if you've got questions about how ants and therefore the swarm probably are related to each other and what exactly the hell we're talking about. Any other questions? We have time for one more, maybe. Okay, cool. So yeah, anyway, this was Panera, Heretic, Potato Lisk, and Brutaxlos, all sort of talking about the Baneling. Make sure to post questions and whatnot in the threads and in the comments sections.
Keep spam bumping the threads too. It doesn't ever hurt.
Yeah, keep spamming the threads. We want them to get to the top, to the most viewed.
Just don't get banned.
Yeah, don't get banned.
Don't be that guy that spams it every. Don't be Ire who spam bumps it every 10 seconds.
Oh God, yes. And here's the thing. Okay, here's the official Anatomy of Starcraft word on this: don't get banned.
You might have to cut out that section because it would be calling someone out on the forums, technically.
Whatever.
Yeah, but this isn't on the forums.
This isn't the forums. They can't ban us from Skype.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but they
Heretic would know. He's been banned, 3 times now?
Well, I've been banned on 2 accounts, 7 times total, I think.
Well,
there you go, buddy. So wait,
I'll give you a medal for that.
Tell us how not to...
All right, so I guess we're all done here, and I'll hopefully get this up in the next 24 hours or so, but we'll see. So keep your eye out for the thread, guys.
All right.